Welcome to episode 6 of the Mod Pod, the new weekly podcast. Oh, for f***'s sake. Welcome to episode 6 of the Mod Pod, the new weekly modcast brought to you by the KUMB team. This week, I'm delighted to be joined on the virtual sofa in the virtual studio by my fellow team members Gnome, Rio, DL, and the Pink Palermo. I'm also particularly delighted to welcome to the show for his debut appearance, football writer Matt Slater. Matt spent a decade and a half working for Auntie, that's the BBC, not my uncle's wife Jan, before becoming chief sports reporter for the PA, formerly known as the Press Association, where he spent 3 years. Once banned from premises by former Chelsea owner Ken Bates, more recently he became part of The Athletic, which sucked up many of the UK's finest journalists in a push to expand into football and UK sport. Even though he's based in the Northwest these days, Matt remains a loyal Southend United supporter and still manages to attend around half a dozen games or so per season. Rumours that he has applied to be the Blues' next manager following the recent dismissal of Sol Campbell because the alternatives are even worse remain unfounded. And so it's with a 5-strong panel that we head into the opening topic of debate tonight. And for a change, we're dipping into the wider world of football to begin with. At the beginning of July, Wigan Athletic announced they were entering administration just a matter of months after Bury FC, founded 135 years ago in 1885, were expelled from the Football League as a result of similar financial difficulties. Our special guests club, Southend United, have also experienced severe financial problems of late, while it was recently suggested that several clubs in the Championship and EFL could follow Bury and Wigan as a result of reduced income in the wake of the current pandemic. With this very much in mind, I wanted to ask our panel whether they feel the Premier League clubs, who are awash with cash as members of the world's richest domestic division, have a moral obligation to support the lower league clubs, or should it be a case of applying the survival of the fittest law? To get us underway tonight, I'll point that question towards Matt, our guest, who has closely followed the situation at Roots Hall and, given his day job, is acutely aware of the problems experienced by many of the EFL clubs.
Yes, I strongly believe that that there's a moral but financial obligation on the top to fund that in a way, and ever since 1992, that strong link we had that worked so well for 110 years has been stretched, and has been stretched to the point of a breaking point a number of times. What's interesting about this crisis is it has shone a light, and we're all struggling. So your club is 25% down, my club is 25% down, and everyone's down. And for the next 18 months, I think probably we're going to be dealing with that. No one's gone bust yet. The Wigan thing, trust me, is a red herring. It's got nothing to do with COVID-19 whatsoever. It's got to do with crazy Chinese dodginess, which we will learn about pretty soon, I think. Well, maybe we'll never learn about it. It doesn't matter. Trust me, it's Chinese dodginess. There's going to be a dozen clubs that will go to the wall, close to the wall. And then it's really just how football handles that. Football as a industry chooses to deal with that. So it's a long-winded answer, but post-92, the distribution of money has got concentrated at the top, and that has made life really, really difficult. The Championship is a complete car crash. It's an absolute, it makes no sense. That it's being bankrolled by wealthy people who are all desperate to get in your club. So, you know, I could rant about this for hours, but I just want to warn you that it's great while you're in the Premier League, and I know you've had a couple of good results, but if you'd have fallen out of the Premier League, I could do another half an hour on the issues around your club and the money and the sweetheart deal you've had at your stadium. I mean, that's another show as well. But this idea, Arsenal, Spurs, Chelsea would have jettisoned you like that. You'd have been yesterday's news, and they'd have been talking about how lovely and wonderful it is to have Leeds United up there replacing you, and you would not have been missed. I'm sorry, because they do not miss. They get annoyed that they are sharing the money that they say brings in the cash in the Far East.
Yeah, sure.
The people that the money that's the rocket fuel that has made the Premier League what it is right now is being generated by about half a dozen clubs, and because those are the people those are the clubs that are generating the cash in Manila, all the way to Miami and the other direction as well. West Ham is still, I respect West Ham, but it's still a regional club. It is still, most of your support comes from southeast, the southeast of England.
Mm-hmm.
Manchester United, Liverpool, Leeds United, strangely, the Big Six, they're global brands now, and this is the unfairness of the Premier League.
Yeah, it's actually interesting you mentioned Leeds, because I think that perhaps, like Liverpool, is a slight generational thing from the 70s, where they were so successful, and I guess people sort of my generation are still. There's a lot of Leeds fans around here still. So Gnome, some interesting points from Matt there about the redistribution of wealth. What do you think about that? Do you think the Premier League has a moral obligation to support the EFL, or do you think they should be forced to go it alone?
I think there is a moral obligation. I just don't think that the richest clubs in the Premier League see it that way. Mm-hmm. Matt mentioned that the sort of redistribution of wealth since 1992, when, as we all know, football started with the Premier League and didn't exist beforehand. But I'd say it goes back even further than that. When we had just the Football League, or EFL as it later became, up until about 1983, the rule was that away clubs got, I think in 1983 it was 20% of the gate. And bearing in mind back then, this was a period when we didn't have major multi-billion pound TV deals. You had your match of the day, your big match, or your regional program. Mm-hmm. So gate money was actually by far and away the most important source of income at all levels. Nowadays, obviously, Premier League, it's TV money, and the further down the chain you go, the more the balance towards gate money is kind of restored. But 1983, there were all these rumblings about a Super League, Liverpool, Manchester United, amongst others. Started saying exactly what Matt was saying. Why are we having to hand over so much money to these other clubs when it's our ground, it's our gate? And people started to panic. They didn't want to see the top teams hive off into a Super League. Yeah. So okay, keep all your gate money. And that was the point where that the whole Football League was sort of going back to the 1880s. Always had some form of sort of redistribution going on. The percentages may have changed up and down the years, but there was always that going on. And it was from that point that it was kind of, we're rich and we want to carry on getting richer and blow the rest of you. So is there an obligation, a moral obligation? I think there is. Unfortunately, the people with the most power to do these things don't see it that way.
Okay, good stuff. DL, we've already seen Bury go to the wall this season. Wigan have gone into administration. Matt's own club, Southend United, have had their own much highlighted issues financially, as have several other clubs. And the talk, of course, a few weeks ago was that perhaps half of the clubs in the Championship could go into administration as a result of the lack of revenue since the lockdown period began. What do you think about this issue? I mean, we are sitting here. Matt made a very good point, and this is one of the reasons why we ask people who aren't necessarily West Ham fans to come in on the show, because it removes us from that sort of bubble and gives an alternative opinion that we probably need at some point just to keep our feet on the ground. But do you agree with Matt, or do you kind of think that it's as we say, could it be a case that, the Football League needs to get their own house in order, and they should really look after themselves, spend their money a little bit more wisely?
I think it's a combination of both. They need to spend their money more wisely, and I think there's way too much money floating at the top echelons of the sport.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't think it would be appropriate for the larger clubs to bail out the smaller clubs as a whole. I mean, at the end of the day, these clubs have become big for a reason because, at some point they've been well run, they've been successful. Bournemouth, Wimbledon, back in the day, it can be done. You can get from the lower leagues into the Premier League if you're sensible about it. However, times are completely different. The clubs are struggling because of COVID. They've not got the money coming in on the gate. They've not got the money coming in on the pies. If somebody was saying on Talk Sport the other day actually about, I think it was, who's that comedian bloke, Bob Mills, and I kind of made him right. I was driving back from Wales, and he was talking about how when a club that's only getting 3,000 on the gate one day only gets 1,500, as the amount of pies they haven't sold is a dent in their finances. Kind of. So it's down there. It is extremely fine margins. So it would be nice as a one-off because of the current circumstances for the richer clubs to help bail them out. But I don't think it should be on a permanent basis as a one-off. Goodwill gesture. I mean, even a club like us could probably afford to bang 3, 4, 5 mil into the pot, and it gets distributed evenly between the clubs that are in the lower leagues. And I don't talk about championship clubs. I'm talking about the League Ones and the League Twos, and maybe even as far down as the Conference. But after that, it is. I did feel it is a case of getting their own house in order as well. Take Wigan as a fine example. Quite why they're going into administration, I still think people don't really know. There was the alleged rumours of a betting ring or whatever. But that one just seemed very odd that the club's been sold. I think there's something amiss there. But the other club, I mean, on a local level, I mean, I'm an Essex boy myself, even though I live in Kent. Grays Athletic was rinsed, and they're kind of in existence, but they were FA Trophy holders. They were close to getting into the Football League, and then all of a sudden the owners completely stripped the club, and they're now travelling. They haven't got their own ground. They're as good as dead, really, and I think that's a shame. So there needs to be more due diligence on owners as well. I just seem to think that in the lower leagues, if you can show you've got a fat enough checkbook and no responsibility, you can run a club. And that needs to change. The EFL need to change their fit and proper test, because too many clubs are going to the wall, not just because of COVID and poor spending, but owners actually asset stripping the club. And I think that's wrong, because at the end of the day, grassroots football is what that makes the game at the top level. And without that, soon we're having it now where even we have fielded a side with just one homegrown player in it, which I find that actually preposterous. It's the English League, crying out loud. So it's a combination of both. We can do something because of the unusual times, but they do need to get their house in order as well. But again, I suppose by the other side of the coin is that you can't force the youngsters to go and support your Gillinghams or go and support your Southend's. They're going to want to walk around in their Liverpool kits, their Chelsea kits, and whatever. And I think that's the difficulty that the smaller clubs face. It's not so bad. It wasn't so bad when I was younger, but now the staunch hammer like Geordie Hammer off of KUMB, for example. He's supported West Ham all his life, and so's his son. But his son's now supporting Newcastle, and it's good Lord. And that was something I never saw coming, because they used to go to games. So that, in a way, I suppose is a good thing, because he's now supporting his local club. We go down to the gym. we can't get to West Ham, or we ain't really got the money to go to West Ham, we'll go down to Gills. And it's actually not, you know, the lower leagues is a good day out. And it would be nice if supporters of the larger, if it's not just down to the larger clubs to put money into the local clubs, we can do our bit as well. Like you said yourself, you was a season ticket holder down at Roos Hall. When the gates open again, I'll be back down the Priestfield with Milletland and the missus, because it's a good day out. It's not like Premier League football. You know, you can almost touch the players.
Yeah, well, I mean that's a really good point, actually, because especially at West Ham, where we've kind of lost that, haven't we? I mean we're sort of veering off into another area here, but you know that we've sort of lost that closeness, you know, with the players. The fact that especially at the Olympic Stadium, we're so far from the ground, but you do get that at a lower level. I mean, we spoke earlier about Southend. I mean, I can remember going to a game many years ago where I don't think it was Tilson, actually. I think it was one of his teammates, but someone said something in the crowd and he could hear it, and he actually jumped in, and well, there was a little bit of a disagreement, shall we say, between the player and the supporter, who was obviously a bit worse for wear, but kind of like a Cantona-esque situation. But could you know, you just wouldn't get that at the Olympic Stadium, would you? It couldn't happen now.
No.
But thank you for that, DL. Pinky, coming to you for your thoughts on this one. The Premier League is awash with money at the moment. You know, it's rich. It's the richest league in the world. The 20-member league clubs have got more money than they've ever had. While, you know, we see clubs like Bury and Wigan and Southend, etc., struggling. Is that the way it should be? Is that just natural selection?
Yeah, I mean, since its inception, 52 of the 92 Football League clubs have played in the Premier League. You know, that's just a fact.
Mm-hmm.
So teams have battled to get in there. We were a club that had to battle to get in there because we weren't in the first season of the Premier League.
Yeah.
That was the season we were losing to Southend United.
Indeed, it was.
So, you know, quite frankly, we were in, both clubs were in what we will always know as Division 2 that season.
Mm-hmm.
Yet West Ham United have managed to battle against the odds to get up into the Premier League, and Southend United haven't. And you know, there's a reason for that. Obviously, you know, it's the size of the clubs and what have you. But my central point is, so many football clubs, and I include Premier League clubs in this, but so many football clubs are dreadfully run. And rather than look to their competitors for a handout and a hand up, they need to put their own house in order. And I've just pulled Southend United's accounts, you know, since we've got Matt with us. Yeah. Any business that has a turnover of £6.7 million, as it had in 2018,
mm-hmm.
yeah, and pays out £5.6 million in wages, is not a well-run business. Forget the fact it's a football club. Why would you do it? Why would you operate at, as they were, substantial losses before directors, you know, putting more money into the club?
Yeah.
And think that it's the Premier League's fault that you're operating as a loss maker. You know, and the fact of the matter is, if those clubs in what we would call Division 3 and Division 4
mm-hmm.
Actually addressed their own issues, I would have considerably more sympathy. I take Matt's point about, you know, it could be us next, because it's well known. You know, if you take the so-called ECA, European Clubs Association, whose sole function is to basically bully UEFA into giving them even more money, that's the crowd that decided they didn't want Man City as part of the club. And that's what that whole charade was about over, you know, last week. So I recognise that there are groups within groups within groups, and you know, is it the survival of the fittest or survival of the greediest? But what I'm absolutely clear on, it is not the Premier League's fault that Southend United spend more than they earn. That's Southend United's fault, you know, and every lower league club's fault. And if you look at some of the teams that have been in the Premier League, there's actually 3 teams in League 2 now that were Premier League clubs. there are 5 teams in League One that were Premier League clubs. Every club in the Championship, bar 5, have been in the Premier League. You know, so plenty of them have had a crack, plenty of them have got there, but none of them have learnt the lessons of, do you know what? If you spend more than you earn, you're going to be in the poorhouse sooner or later. You know, and get the basics put right first.
Yep.
Then go to the Premier League and say, hang on, lads, how about sharing the pot a bit more evenly? Because, yeah, it's just nonsense. It's just nonsense, the fact that they think they can go to the Premier League and say, do you know what? You are our rivals, the clubs in the Premier League this season, who are our rivals. Give us some of your money. In what other industry would that happen? Does that happen in other football countries? I suspect not. You know, and I think what we've got, despite how loved some of these clubs are, and they are, you know, a Southend United supporter will love their club as much as we love West Ham, and fair play to them. But you'd have to ask, how on earth are they shuffling through £5 million a year in wages? Because it's millions they don't have. Just pay the players less. There you go.
There you go. Pay the players less, says Pinky. Rio, I will come to you for your view in just a second, buddy, but I just want to throw that question over to Matt, seeing as he's our non-West Ham supporter today and a supporter of an EFL club. Matt, what are your views on what Pinky just had to say there about, you know, overspending?
Yeah, I mean, just very quickly, absolutely. And when I talk to EFL clubs, certainly the EFL board, they're currently trying to push through salary caps for League 2, League 1 and the Championship. And certainly the better run clubs are very keen on the idea of salary caps. There actually was a pretty good soft salary cap that was tied to turnover that they then sort of jettisoned for a while under pressure of the clubs that wanted to live the dream, that were so desperate to reach the Premier League, which is where all the wealth is. And I think we should never forget that the Premier League has a skewing effect on the rest of the industry. So I think many of the sensible people in the EFL are very, very aware of overspending and want to do something about it. I mean, look, we can all pick on certain clubs to say how poorly run they've been. And trust me, they've kept me busy over the last 10, 15 years. And Southend are one of them. Yeah. I mean, I'm never going to defend Ron Martin's running of my club. And he ticks many of the boxes. It's a clear property play. It was all about a supermarket, and then it was about a casino, then it was about a hotel. It's all about property. And unfortunately, I could tell you 50, 60 of these clubs, these stories around the country where it's been about the brownfield asset in the middle of town. And because football is so poorly governed, and they thought they could sort of stumble along, bung a bit of money just to run the club for a bit, and then maybe, you know, use that as leverage with the local council to get the thing that they really, really wanted. Now, we've had loads of these, and they nearly, well, it's sort of 50-50 how often they go well, but they very rarely will go well for the football club, put it that way. But look, football as an industry, the number of people that make money in football are few and far between, and they tend to be people that that either kind of inherited their clubs and then sold in the sort of, you know, the Premier League boom years. At some point, I think Fenway Sports Group will make a lot of money. They bought Liverpool for 300 million or so. They're probably worth about 2 billion-ish now. Yeah. They're hedge fund guys, you know. There are very few that are really running it well. I suppose Sullivan and Gold have made careers out of running football clubs, first Birmingham, then you. But God, there's easier ways to earn a living, guys. You know, you can list Southend's numbers to me. I know them off the back of my heart. You guys lost 30 million last year, pre-tax loss. So, you know, you're hardly paragons, are you? I can't remember because I haven't got the numbers in front of me. But what's your wage turnover? I'd imagine it's 80 odd, isn't it?
About 65% now. It's below that magic 70% threshold.
Right. But okay, I'll take your word for it. Great deal. That's good for you then. But I'm still struggling how you lost 30 odd million, because I know you lost. It was 28 million, wasn't it? Your pre-tax.
It was, yeah, something around that. Yeah.
Matt, just coming in on your brownfield site comment as well.
Yeah.
the whole reason, Sullivan and Gold bought West Ham United was just that. I mean, so we understand that probably more than any other Premier League club supporters do. It was knock out the bowling ground, do a property flip with another company. Who knows where the money went?
Well, I've written about that. So that's a really interesting deal. Where that money went and how quickly that was flipped from one company to another.
Yeah, 24 hours, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah. Actually, I've just checked. Your waste turnover 71%, which is good because you're around where UEFA would like you, 70. But look, but the point is, in this league that you're in, Bournemouth 85%, Everton 85%, Leicester 84%, Crystal Palace 77%. I mean, are these any better run than any number of clubs in League One or League Two? Not really. Just that you've got more money coming through the door.
Absolutely.
I mean, the whole point of. I remember when Premier League brought in financial fair play rules that are very light touch. I mean, Richard Scudamore, the boss of Premier League, genuinely was embarrassed. He could not believe that Portsmouth had gone bust on his watch. I remember he was personally offended that a Premier League club had gone bust. Mm-hmm. He could not believe. It was almost like you almost have to try to go bust. How did this happen? Now, that's fine because you had the lion's share of the domestic broadcast cash delivered to clubs in 3 great installments every year. And because of the show and because of the interest, and trust me, no one needs to explain to me the pull and the attraction of Premier League football and how well marketed it is. So I'm a Southend fan, but I live in the northwest. I live in Macclesfield, right? So Macclesfield is a classic sort of town, much like Bury, much like a lot of these places around here, where the great big shining metropolis that we can see is Manchester. And every kid is wearing a red shirt or a blue shirt. And when the Blues are doing well, there's more Blues. So I can tell you about being a coach at an under-9 team and watching 8 of the 10 turn up in Manchester City kits in Macclesfield and seeing the dads around the side going, what is going on? Because they're all Man United fans.
Yeah.
And their kids are now Man City fans. And Macclesfield down the road are, heading towards the National League because they missed their wages, 6 times this year. So the ironies of the football landscape and the economy are played out every Saturday mornings in junior football, where we are, we're in Macclesfield. The Moss Rose is down the road. They're bust. They can hardly play. They're players sleeping in cars this season. Genuine story. I wrote the story, so I know it to be true. And here we are. We're watching our children wearing Man City shirts.
Yeah, I think that's the same, isn't it, countrywide? I mean, at our local grassroots club down here in Essex, I think you see more Barcelona shirts on kids than Southend United.
Don't get me
possibly
started
even
on
West
that.
Ham as well. It's a problem across the nation. Rio, you've been sitting there waiting patiently for your opportunity to comment on this particular subject. Let me come to you last, my friend. What do you think about this? Do you think it's time that government stepped in and perhaps did something about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not romantic when it comes to football. I want the 92 to survive and thrive because when you go lower down the chain, a lot of these clubs are not just football clubs. They're hearts of the community. And we saw the effect it had on Bury and how devastating it was for the actual town.
Yeah.
And there's so much money in football, but it's ended up in the hands of the wrong people. There's a lot of rich agents, a lot of really average players who are multi-millionaires, and what they earn in a year could have kept the whole club with hundreds of years of history afloat, and kept the community alive. So there needs to be some kind of legislation and governance in terms of the way that football is run, how clubs spend their money, like Matt said about the salary caps and stuff like that. That has to happen. We've seen in the wake of the ITV digital collapse.
Yep.
How you give football clubs money and they'll spend all of that money in advance plus 10%, chasing a dream which might never happen. And that's got to stop. And the way that football is run has got to change permanently.
I suppose the alternative to that is to run a club similarly to how Norwich City have perhaps done it for the last couple of years. But I just wonder if any of their fans would, look at it in the same way as we have, given that, they spent something like £6 million, didn't they, in pre-season? And the consequence of that is that they're, going down to the Championship, having accrued 21 points from 37 games in the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's the age we live in, isn't it? I mean, a lot of fans, and they're all kind of dominated by what happens on TV, the glory, chasing a dream. When we read on some of the Norwich forums, didn't we, when you compiled the post-match aftermath?
Yeah.
A lot of them seem quite reasonable in their outlook. But that's few and far between. You got most other clubs in the country, and they'll be would have been demanding Fox said, look at the managers we lost today. Nigel Pearson's been in charge for 8-10 games. Danny Cowley done a decent job. He's gone. And football's changed considerably beyond all recognition over the last 30 years. It's not for the better.
No, it's not. And I'm just going to touch on that quickly, actually, just interested to hear what you all feel about that. As Rio's pointed out there, it's been a very strange day in that we've seen two managers get sacked 2 games from the end of the season. We've seen Nigel Pearson fired from Watford, and we've seen Danny Cowley, who, of course, we all know about as West Ham supporters because he is one of our own, get the tin tack from Huddersfield Town. I mean, of course, Danny Cowley has had an incredible career so far. Both him and his brother have, worked from the non-league and got themselves into a fantastic position. But no, let me come to you on that one first of all. Been a very, very strange day. We saw Pearson fired. I mean, it looked like he had Watford assured of a place in the Premier League. He came in, they were in dire straits. It looked like they were going well, and it's the sort of wheels have fallen off again. But what do you make of that, and also of Danny Cowley's sacking down at Huddersfield?
Well, the Pearson one is just amazing, isn't it? I mean, I presume they've issued the standard statement, have they, about thanking him for his past efforts and wishing him all the best for the future. But he was only brought into the end of the season in any case.
Yeah.
And with the idea that come in, stay at the end of the season, keep us up, and see what's happening. Well, what are they trying to achieve by getting rid of him now? What is Hayden Mullins, who's coming in on a caretaker basis for the last 2 games, what do they expect Mullins to be able to do that they don't think Pearson could have done?
Mm-hmm.
And it just seems very strange. A club that's can be a bit parsimonious when it comes to paying managers off and things like that. They will look for ways of avoiding it if they can. They've got to pay him 2 weeks' worth of wages because he only had a contract at the end of the season. Is Mullins going to do anything different? No, you might as well. It just seems a bit pointless. When did Cowley come in at Huddersfield? I mean,
I think it was around the end of September, wasn't it? I believe that they'd gone the first 6 games or so without winning. I've had a point or two. And I think his brief was to keep them up, which he's done, but it's obviously not good enough.
Depends on what the brief was. I mean, they went up the season before last season. The calendar's all over the place at the moment, but and that I think may have given the owners, the board, or whatever, some sort of heightened expectation. Perhaps they thought that coming down with the parachute payments, they should be challenging again. When the reality may have been that they had a decent season, things went their way, they came up. Maybe they were expecting that again. I don't know. But if the brief was just to keep them up, well, he did that remarkable result against West Brom the other night. Again, it seems a little bit odd, but I don't know. It's nothing really.
Two very strange, very strange sackings. Anyway, Dia, what's your view on that? Pearson, it's looking very difficult for Watford now, isn't it? They've got Man City and Arsenal, I think, in their final 2 games. You can't really see them getting any points from that. But what is the point of sacking Pearson now? What do you think they hope to achieve by that?
I could look at it as they have got games that they ain't likely to get anything from. What's the point in keeping him on?
Yeah.
Bit of a double-edged sword, isn't it? they ain't going to win nothing else, even with Pearson at the helm. So might be a chance to show what the former Hammer can do. You never know, he might be full-time manager at the start of the season in the Championship. Initially, I was a bit puzzled why they do it, but again, seeing their 2 fixtures, what's the point? You know, it's an if or isn't it? I don't think the sacking of Pearson is going to make any difference as to whether Watford stay in the division or not this season. So,
okay, and Danny and Nicky Cowley, thoughts on that?
Again, with those two, I don't really know much about them. I know about the fairy tale that they've gone from Concord all the way through to the Championship.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, 13 wins out of 40 isn't good form, whatever way you look at it. Especially for a side where the bulk of it's been kept together, and it's the side that got promoted from the Championship and spent the season, albeit poorly, in the Premier League. So they'll get up, they'll brush themselves down. Don't like to see managers, especially West Ham fans, getting the sack anyway. So they'll brush themselves down. They'll get another job. They're at the start of their careers. You know, it's everybody. I think all of us here in our careers, we've had ups and downs, and we've picked ourselves up and got on with it. It'll be a good test of their character, and it'll be interesting to see where they turn up.
Yeah, I guess it's the first setback they've really suffered in their career so far. They've certainly done very, very well since, as you said, they started at Concord Rangers over here on Canvey Island, or just over the creek there on Canvey Island. Rio, I could pose you a task now. Pearson has been sacked following West Ham United's defeat of Watford on Friday night. Who was the last manager to get the tin tack following defeat against West Ham? I'll come back to you in a little while, see if you know the answer to that one as our resident statistician. Pinky, coming to you. Nigel Pearson, abrasive character that seems to fall out of a lot of people, but still a surprise that today, no?
Yes and no, because as you say, he is an abrasive character, and those of us that glance at Twitter occasionally will see the rumours doing the rounds currently, which, because you're not blessed with a huge army of lawyers, I probably won't repeat on this programme.
Probably wise.
Yeah, but you know, he's working at a club where the owners will pull the trigger at the drop of a hat. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
So, you know, the fact that he's the third or the fourth person there this season gives us all a clue as to how they behave. Secondly, he's won 7 of 23 games.
Mm.
And you could say, well, yep, good, bad. Fact of the matter is, it is 7 of 23. I think what's clouding people's judgment is the timing in terms of 2 games to go. They'll probably survive, probably. But if they don't, he couldn't influence it sufficiently on Friday night against West Ham United. So why would you, in a crisis situation, believe he's the guy to influence it in the next 2 games? Mm-hmm. They're almost at the point that the club has nothing to lose. And if he has provided an excuse because of things that may or may not have gone on, well, the directors of Watford Football Club aren't going to miss that opportunity. You know, particularly if there's a bonus payment due for keeping them in the Premier League. So I would file that one under watch it with interest when the lawyers go in to negotiate a settlement. Mm-hmm. As for the Cowleys,
yes.
bit more interesting, I suspect. When a club gets relegated from the top flight, or any club, the first thing you've absolutely got to do is change the losing mentality in the dressing room. You've got a squad of players who've just had a season where they're getting battered every single week. They drop down a division, and those players probably think, I'm a Premier League player. No, they're not. They're footballers who weren't good enough for the Premier League. Mm-hmm. And the task for the manager, whoever it is, whether it's a chap from Germany or whether it's some nice upcoming managers, is you have got to change that mindset and that mentality. And the only sympathy I'd have with them is if they came in too late, and that might seem strange after only 6 or 7 games. Mm. You know, the directors of Huddersfield Town should have been clearing that squad out if they had any doubts at all in the summer. The fact they couldn't probably confirmed why they should have had doubts, because they can't shift the players. The Cowleys were then on a very difficult mission in the sense of you've got people with the wrong mindset, the wrong skill set, and it's an uphill struggle. Having said that, they've won 13 games out of 40, and would we accept that from West Ham United manager?
Yeah.
30 years ago, maybe. Now, not a chance. And I'm afraid they've kind of paid the price for taking the wrong job or the right job at the wrong time. You know, good luck to them going forward.
Yeah.
13 out of 40, you ain't keeping your job.
No, that's it. It's interesting. I think going back to something you mentioned a little bit earlier, I think you said that all but 5 of the clubs currently in the Championship were former Premier League clubs. So it's, you know, they talk about it being the Premier League graveyard, but it's a tough, as we as West Ham United supporters know, it's difficult getting out of that division, even with the resources, you know, and advantages that we had as a club in 2005 and 2012. It's not easy. We never made it up, did we? Automatically, we had to rely on the playoffs on both occasions.
Square the circle, Graham. Just on that,
yes. Yeah.
You know, I think one of the issues that the Premier League has is that everybody wants to get in it.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to get rich. Everyone wants to cash in on the dream. And I suspect the clubs in the Championship and lower that have never been anywhere near the Premier League and have never really wanted to get anywhere near it are probably the happiest clubs, the best run community clubs, and actually are living closer to their means than those who have dared to dream. It's a very expensive dream, and that's the issue with it.
Okay, good stuff. Thank you. Matt, West Ham, of course, have more links at Watford than just Hayden Mullins. Scott Duxbury, of course, was our CEO here at the time of the Tevez scandal, and kind of a friend of our websites. We spoke to him at the time quite extensively about what happened. Interesting comments he made about someone you mentioned earlier, about Richard Scudamore, that once again, without a whole list of lawyers on our side, we can't really go into. But just touching on the 2 managerial decisions there. Pearson, Nigel Pearson, first of all. Do you think that's strange? Do you think that perhaps they've had an argument in Pearson's, characteristic way, or do you think it's just a question that they had it lined up and they thought this is the good time to pull the trigger?
I'm going to be sort of quite careful here, because I have obviously heard some of the things that you guys have heard and read, but it's not my club. I don't have absolute inside intel, and I certainly don't know anything that I would want to put in print. But look, what I will say is he is an abrasive character that has fallen out with people before. Watford also, under the Pozzos, have a very sort of Serie A approach to their managers, which means they don't massively care about them, and they do a job. And the Pozzos are the most important people there. Scott Duxbury is far more important than any manager there, and that's why they tend to have 2 or 3 every season. Your job is to coach the players and whip them into shape and hopefully put them on the field in the right places. And Pearson's not bad at that, and it does. When you look at it, you sort of think, hold on a minute, Watford were the first team to beat Liverpool for a long time. Of course, and that didn't happen that long ago. That was when Liverpool was still good. And still, so that seems like quite an unusual decision, and but since Project Restart, none of those, well, you and Brighton apart, have really come out of the traps and done what's required. So given his own personal history, given Watford's approach to managers, given the way the last month has gone, no, it's not a massive shock.
Okay.
The Cowleys are really interesting. The Cowleys one is
the Cowleys,
interesting. I'll do that one quickly. The thing about Huddersfield is, in the last few years, there's been huge changes at Huddersfield.
Yeah.
Change of ownership. There's been an entire change of approach as to how they do player development. They sort of kind of flirted with the whole Brentford idea. The Cowleys were sort of supposed to sort of be the kind of the next bit there. Again, I am slightly. The Cowleys are in demand. The Cowley. It's no one is blaming the Cowleys, I don't think, for where Huddersfield have been recently. Actually, out of the resumption, they've been pretty good. They're just coming off the back, obviously, of a big win against West Brom.
Yep.
I think they've only lost 1 out of 6. The Cowleys, they're going to be fine. I think other clubs slightly higher up the table in the Championship might quite like some of the Cowley action themselves, and I wonder if that's what has happened here.
Interesting. Oh, that's an interesting point. Yeah, I mean, they were certainly in demand. The success they had at Lincoln was fantastic, and I was kind of quite surprised that they took that Huddersfield job on because it looked like they were kind of on a hiding to nothing there. But interesting to hear you say that.
Good points. No, they look. Huddersfield had were punching way above their weight in the Premier League.
Absolutely.
And didn't make the best dint of their crack at the Premier League, did they?
Not
so they were going that way, and I wonder if it was maybe poor due diligence on the Cowleys' part.
Okay.
They maybe took the wrong gig.
Interesting comments. Thanks, Matt. Rio, I hope you've been looking at your records there while we've been chatting to the rest of the guys. Any thoughts on the last manager to be sacked following a defeat by West Ham?
I've drawn a blank so far. I thought it might be David Wagner, but it wasn't, unfortunately.
Okay.
So I'm back a bit further. I might have to come back to you in another episode for that one.
Perhaps that's something we can look back. I'm sure there was one earlier in the season, but I shall defer to your greater knowledge on that one. Rio, your thoughts on the managerial sackings that we've seen in the last 12 hours?
Yeah, no, Watford's bizarre. I mean, it's a bit of a bizarre club. We said earlier in an earlier show that they're not too badly run. They have a plan. But unfortunately, that plan seems to let's get as many managers in as possible and get rid of them as soon as we can. I think if you include Mullins, they'll be on their 12th in 8 years.
Wow.
Which is just crazy.
Yeah.
Yet they've still sustained their Premier League status, and they're punching above their weight in the Premier League, let's be honest. But it's just a really bizarre one. And we'll bring up our former midfielder, who I used to have a bit of a soft spot for. He used to get a lot of stick. But it was caught on camera, I think, rooting around his snozzle the other night. So in these COVID times, that's not a good thing, Hayden. Keep it quiet, please, mate.
I suppose he's not quite in Joachim Low territory. It could be worse, I guess.
Oh, yeah. The Cowleys, as been said, they won't be out of work for long. They've built up a really good reputation for doing a really good job at a lower level.
Yeah.
It seems just strange decisions since they kept them up. But, yeah, no, they won't be out of work for long. And I'm sure that I've got a funny feeling there'll be a reasonably big club in League One pretty soon.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
Right. Interesting. The one you mean.
We shall see. Championship or League One. It looks like the Cowleys are going to be back in football pretty soon. And of course, as relatively local lads from Gants Hill, we wish them well. And of course, big West Ham fans. One of the reasons we asked this, Matt, just to fill you in, is because quite a lot of Hammers have been watching their career progression keenly and also mooted them as potential West Ham managers one day. So that was kind of why we wanted to bring that up tonight anyway. Moving on, I'm going to move back to West Ham for our next topic of conversation. I want to talk about recruitment, really, for the next few minutes. Now, we, of course, as a Premier League club, West Ham United, as a Premier League club, have vast fortunes to spend. We broke our transfer record last year by spending an obscene £45 million on Sebastian Haller. The year before that, we made Felipe Anderson our record signing. A year we also brought in Andrei Yarmolenko from the Bundesliga. The three transfers probably worth in the region of £100 million. Yet on Friday, in a Premier League clash against Watford, all three started the game on the bench. My question really to begin with, and Rio, I'll start with you on this one. Why is it that West Ham get it so wrong consistently? It's not really a lack of money, is it? Or, is there more to it to that? Well, why have we got an incoherent transfer policy?
I think the root of our problem currently stems from the change of ownership.
Okay.
Because not only did we get a new manager, a new chairman, we also got someone who thought they knew the transfer market better than any manager they'd ever employed. I think years of working with Barry Fry have addled his brain a little bit. if they gave him a bit of delusions of grandeur. But yeah, Mr. Sullivan likes a punt, and he does tend to. I don't know, it's inexplicable the way that he thinks he can pick a player better than people who have spent their whole lifetime in football. Before that, we didn't do too bad. I mean, when managers were actually in control of who they bought, we did all right. I think Alan Pardew, when he was in charge, he bought some like the lads from Wimbledon.
Mm-hmm. Rio Coker, Noland.
Yeah, Rio Coker, and stuff like that. You know, he built a really good squad, like, using players that he trusted and he knew and he could get the best out of.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of had a little bit of demise under Kirbishley, who seemed to use the Rothmans Football Yearbook as a guideline. Only his one was 5 years out of date, so we was buying the cream of 2002. Sadly, in 2007.
By which you mean the Nobby Solanos, the Freddie Lundbergs, players of that ilk?
Yeah.
Though we did, of course, buy Scott Parker around that time, didn't we? Was that Kirbishley?
Yeah, that was a one-off though, wasn't it? Because like, we also bought Kieran Dyer, Freddie Lundberg a lot. So no, we'll write him off. But he started the demise, and Sullivan's come in and just run roughshod about over everybody. And of late, obviously, we've brought in a director of football who seemed to think that a certain goalkeeper was the answer to all their issues. You know, we just do everything on the cheap. We don't invest properly in scouting techniques. Apparently, our scouting network is breaking down to about 5 or 6 people, isn't it?
Yeah, that's something I'm going to cut. Actually, if I'm going to go over to Matt at this point, because this is the first thing that Matt and I actually spoke about some months ago when he asked me to comment on a story he was writing about the scouting problems at West Ham. Under Pellegrini, Matt, I think you determined that we had something like, was it 6 scouts, 4 based in the UK and 2 overseas. But of course, one of those based in the UK was Manuel Pellegrini's son. And you were asking at the time whether, West Ham, we didn't feel they scouted properly. Your figures, I think Everton had something like 300 scouts, was it, worldwide? Leeds in the Championship even had more, Newcastle as well. But you felt that was really the problem at West Ham, the lack of scouting.
Yeah. Well, the gist of the story was that you had a very small scout, certainly in terms of numbers, you had a very small scouting department. I think some of the, to be fair, there was a bit of a trend in football to go away from these really large informal networks of kind of eyes and ears on the ground everywhere. Everton still being a bit old school, and United to a lesser extent, they do a bit of everything. To really targeted scouting, and this is so much of it is done online now using kind of data and analysis. And I think, to be fair, West Ham, you are using all the right bits of software. I think what came across to me was there was quite a lot of nepotism there, and some of the guys who were making the decisions just hadn't really been in the game very long. I don't need to tell you a lot about how you've spent your money. I mean, you didn't seem to spend it very well. And when we asked around about how West Ham scouting was viewed, it was sort of seemed to be, well, you were catching up and not really paying attention. So it was almost like you'd gone from this very old school approach where, let's say, you'd have like a sort of genius spotter who may or may not be good, may have a good run, but there was not much sort of knowledge in the business. There was not, there's not much sort of cultural knowledge. When that person went, all of his links went, all of his knowledge went. What did you retain as an institution? And then it was sort of like, okay, we're going to go data route now. We're going to sign up to Y Scout and all the things they're using. And did you really get it? Did you have enough eyes on players? And so much I hear now about the clubs that do this really, really well. They were doing that sort of data stuff before us journalists were writing about it about 5 years ago. Now we're all writing about it, but they're now on to the next thing, which is, psychology and cultural fit. And they're doing like forensic sort of working out whether this is going to work. And I'll be writing in about a year's time what Liverpool are doing You know, I don't know what Liverpool are doing right now. I know what they were doing 2 years ago when they went out and built that team on, you know, relatively on the cheap, certainly in terms of the level they're at and net spend and what have you. But just West Ham just sort of seem to be sort of kind of catching up and not sort of doing it very intelligently. And look, the proof was in the pudding ultimately.
Yeah.
Not only did you not appear to have a great couple of windows, but a lot of those guys then got binned. You know, it was sort of like change of ownership, also not change of ownership, change of manager.
Yeah.
A lot of those guys were just cleared out, and it looked like you were starting again. Now, just from the outside looking in, your January window looked all right, and I don't know how you lot feel about Jarrod Bowen, but Jarrod Bowen is a guy who I'd seen him play a couple times for Hull in the Championship, and I kept sort of thinking and kept saying, I might even have written it once, this guy's really good. And a Premier League team, if you've got, you know, 15, 20 million, whatever it is in your pocket, I mean, he looks like a good bet to me. Now, I know he's only put together half a dozen decent games for you, but he strikes me as the sort of guy that you should be buying as opposed to the Allers of this world.
I think he's a very kind of Moyes-esque signing, isn't he? That sort of player. And we know David Moyes looks to the Championship. We've also been linked with a couple of the Wigan guys.
Yeah.
And Robinson, the fullback, as
one.
But I mean, just going back on Bowen, yes, I mean, he's been received really well so far. I think the general consensus is that he's been an absolutely fantastic signing.
Has he scored for you yet?
He scored against Southampton, didn't he? Right. But I think he's provided the second highest number of assists since the Premier League restarted. So, I mean, he's certainly doing his job anyway.
Yeah, I like him. I saw him play a couple of times at Hull. Thought he was really good.
Yeah, great player. And also, I mean, touching on that, you know, this last January window, I mean, David Moyes has obviously had his critics in the past, but one thing he hasn't been criticised for is his work in the transfer window. Jarrod Bowen, and the other signing he brought in January was the midfielder Thomas Souček, who has been, quite frankly, a revelation.
Well, I've watched your games in the last few. Those two, him and Antonio.
And Antonio.
Yeah, look like your best players.
That's it. Pretty much between those three, you know, the view is that they've saved us. Souček, an absolute steal. I think the fee's around 13 million to make that signing permanent this summer, which is one of those things we're obliged to do, apparently, upon staying up in the Premier League. But no, coming back to, thanks, Matt. No, just coming back to the question there of, you know, the club's recruitment, how we get it wrong. You know, Matt touched there upon the point that we should be spending £45 million on players like Sepp Haller. When we did that. But, you know, we've also been, to make up the squad numbers, we've been buying players such as Roberto, getting him in on a free, Ryan Fredericks came in on a free. You know, we're not spending money. So it's kind of a bit of an uneven policy, isn't it?
Yeah. The Haller transfer is kind of a case in point. He had a good record. He's got a fine record in Germany, but it's symptomatic of how we actually have run our recruitment over the years. We've looked at players who've got a good reputation, or you know, sort of they score goals, or they're well known.
Yeah,
and we think, oh well, he's well known. We'll sign him. And Haller has scored goals for fun for Eintracht as part of a two-up partnership.
Yeah.
And he's got a lot of goals last season. We'll sign him. We stick him in the team as a sole striker, which is, you know, palpably not his forte. And then we wonder why he's not doing it well. And it's that sort of thing. We've signed players in the past, Javier Hernandez, you know, poacher and all that, and the number of times we played him up front on his own, for example. You know, we sign players on reputation without seeming, or in the past without having seemed to have any sort of idea about how we're going to actually make them fit into what we've got and how that's going to work. Now, the two exceptions to this have been this window with Souček and Bowen. And you know, they've come in. I mean, and I should be the first one round the club with a baseball bat if, for any reason, the Souček transfer fails to go through because you know, we've forgotten to sign a bit of paper or something like that, which we've forgotten to make a payment on the due date, like Haller and things like that. But yeah, it's going back. There's been all these players that we've signed because of their reputation and they've done well elsewhere. We've not thought how we fit them in. I think that may be changing. Now that we are, cross fingers, barring the usual mathematical things that I don't want to talk about in case I tempt the fates of the gods of football. Now that we are safely up, we need a period of stability whereby the players that are in that team on a Saturday are the players that are in the squad because the managers decided this is how we're going to play and these are the players to do it. Mm-hmm. We've had a change of manager this season, obviously, so Moyes has come in with a sort of Pellegrini, sort of what Pellegrini left him sort of thing. So he's got to work with what he's got. And I think this transfer window may be the first signs that Moyes is having an input into transfers.
Yeah.
Because clearly those are two players that he wanted there. This will mean obviously something of a clear out during the summer. But we need that period of stability where we're not changing a manager every couple of seasons. We've got a way of playing. We get players in that can adapt to that way of playing. So you don't have a striker who's used to playing two up top and not one up top as we've had. So let's hope that actually happens.
Okay.
And the days of players turning up and the manager saying, "Well, who are you?" and he said, "Well, I've just signed," as allegedly happened under Mr. Allardyce.
Yeah.
We don't see the Wellington Paulistas and things like that sort of just turning up out of the blue.
Yes, indeed. One of David Sullivan's gifts to the manager, which he's quite well known for. Deal, it's good to see you back again. You're having a bit of a night there. For those who are unaware, Deal's already lost his electricity to a power cut, and the cats have just smashed a vase, as I understand it from our updates. So
you may have heard the crash.
Thoroughly professional here as always.
It could be worse. You could have fallen into a waterfall last week.
I could have, yeah.
Matt, you don't get this on the Sky supplement, I'm sure. Pinky, let me come to you on that one. A few comments there. We need a period of stability. There's no coherent policy. Moyes has been working with what Pellegrini left him. Of course, he's not only working with what Pellegrini left him, a point that you've touched on before in previous podcasts. He's working with what Slaven Bilic left him. He's working with what Sam Allardyce left him, and he's even working with what Avram Grant left him.
Yeah, and first things first, we need a manager strong enough to sit the chairman down and say, "Mr. Chairman, let's get it clear. Your job is to sign the checks. That's it. Okay, when I come to you for a player, you can say either we have the money or we don't. And if we do, I'd like this one and you sign the check. And if we don't, fine." Mm-hmm. What you're not going to do is sit in front of supporters, as Mr. Sullivan has done, and say, "I personally scouted Demba Ba." Now, I'm sorry, that's just utter nonsense coming from a football club chairman. So if that's your starting point, where the chairman is trying to claim credit for in one season when we actually signed a player that was digging us out of the mire, that's part of the problem. Secondly, if I file the chairman under structure, he appoints Pellegrini. Clearly, won the Premier League with Manchester City, he must be half decent. He then lets Pellegrini essentially appoint his own boss, i.e. the so-called director of football in the Huselos. Yeah. In what other industry would anyone get to recruit and appoint their own boss?
Sure.
None that I can think of. So then suddenly it's, well, who do you blame for the rather dodgy signings of the dodgy keeper who I see let in 5 again today for his club against Barcelona they were playing today. That one signing, you could argue, cost us this season, and we're lucky to survive. So that's one absolutely rank signing that he's underwritten. That's before you get to where you've spent a lot of money on a striker who then you try to put into a system that the striker isn't set up for. Mm-hmm. And that goes back to a lack of clarity of thought, a lack of continuity out with the manager about having an employee at the club who knows something about football. That's why you want a director of football. Unfortunately, we've got a chairman who thinks he is the director of football and he knows better. I mean, not being funny, you may as well have me or you sat there saying, we'll sign this player or that player. Because ultimately, we'd know as much as David Sullivan. I'll be confident. But we wouldn't know anything like as much as David Moyes or Sam Allardyce or even Manuel Pellegrini. Yeah. So ultimately, the structure's wrong, the thought process is wrong, and that's before we get anywhere near the money side of it. Okay. And there's all sorts of, depending on where you pick your starting point and your end point. I'm now looking at stats there saying that we've spent twice as much as Real Madrid in the last 4 years. Mm-hmm. Could be true, could be nonsense. Plain fact is we haven't spent our money well. And even within that, when we've got a player on the books, how do we decide to give Winston Reid a 6-year contract? How does Arthur Masuaku get a long-term contract extension under one manager, and 3 months later he's got a new boss who clearly doesn't like him? It's just the whole football contract management side of the club is sheer incompetence. There's no other word for it. It's incompetence. It's incompetence at boardroom level, and frankly, it's a shambles. And I think Moyes, he's done well with Bowen. He's done really well with Souček, really well. Yeah. But you just know with Sullivan as your boss, you're only a heartbeat away from a dodgy signing. You'll carry the can for as the manager, but is it one that the chairman say, "Oh, I quite like him"?
Okay, thank you, Pinky. DL, as you're back with us, Pinky calls our West Ham's transfer policy a shambles. There's incompetence at board level. We've also heard the guys say that Sullivan interferes too much. We haven't spent our money well, and we're signing players on reputation. Do you think those are all fair criticisms? And if so, what needs to be done?
Absolutely spot on criticisms. Mm-hmm. I think, Sam, we actually have a transfer policy is quite generous, to be honest. It doesn't look like we've got a policy. Mm-hmm. How many scouts we've got? One. That's the rumour, isn't it? Nice to see Moyes was watching players yesterday.
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah.
Say what you like about him with his abilities as a manager, at least he puts the miles in. At least he grafts. He'll go out and he'll look at the player properly. So I'll give him his dues for that. We don't have a policy. We waste money. The contracts that we have given to mediocre players are absolutely ridiculous, as Pinky said. Why give Winston Reid a 6-year deal? Great servant and a horrendous injury he had. But even before his horrendous injury, he was veering on Andy Carroll lengths of injury time out, and we're going to give him a 6-year deal. Same as Masuaku. He's never been great. Mm-hmm. Same as Cresswell. I just don't understand it. These players that we gave these long-term deals to weren't worth the long-term deals. They're the sort of players that if you get an half-decent bid for them, you flog them, and then you go and get someone younger or more hungrier from the lower leagues. It's like, we've given out contracts like they're Lionel Messi, but we're not giving them bumper contracts with bang average players. Mm-hmm. That needs to change. We've got the two left backs on massive contracts. If Moyes says I want a new left back now, what's the ball going to say? Because Cresswell and Masuaku ain't going to take a pay cut and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
The only thing we can do is maybe subsidise a loan or something to get them out of the club. There is no coherent plan. And again, that's where, as has been mentioned on this pod time and time again, I think by all of us, that's where we need a director of football.
Yeah, that seems to be the key, doesn't it? Just looking at the contract links there that you referred to, Aaron Cresswell was given a 4-year contract in October 2019. He's here for another 2 seasons. Winston Reid signed a 6-year deal in August 2017 and has barely played since. Sebastian Haller's here till 2024. And where are we with regards to Albion Ayeti? Signed a 4-year deal with a 2-year option.
Don't get me started.
It kind of backs up really what you're saying there. I'm just looking for Arthur Masuaku, and yes, Masuaku a year ago this month signed a brand new 5-year contract with a 2-year option. It's almost Alan Pardew-esque, that kind of deal, isn't it?
It's just mind-boggling.
Crazy,
really
absolute madness. Anyway, thank you for your contributions to that one, guys. Going to move on swiftly because we're wrapping up fairly soon. I'm going to touch now. Just going to move on to Rio. Seems to be falling off his chair there. You're all right, buddy.
Yeah,
okay.
fine, yeah.
We're going to move on to the topic of football rivalry and Schadenfreude specifically. Because the essence of football rivalry is based upon it not being enough for our own teams to succeed. Others must fail as well. And this is really a question for the West Ham fans on the pod. But Matt, I'm sure, it's Southend out there. Who's Southend rivals currently? It used to be, was it Dagenham before?
Well, it's traditionally it's obviously Colchester.
Of course.
We've got a bit of a weird one with Orient that I'm never that bothered about. Gillingham's a bit of he's just been in the same division as them a lot. That's it, really. I mean, no one takes
no one
seriously.
Really.
Colchester, I suppose.
Gillingham ain't actually that far from Southend, is it?
No, true. In a straight line, it's not.
In a straight line, it's not at all.
No.
When I do search for Argos and things like that, they always send me to the bloody Southend store.
It's quite a tough journey in a straight line, though, isn't it?
It still run from the Isle of Sheppey to Southend. I think it does. It used to go across the water there. But anyway, the question I wanted to ask everybody is if West Ham were to win only one more game this season, quick answer from the panel, would you rather help deny Manchester United a spot in the Champions League or ensure that Aston Villa go down? And I'm going to start with Gnome on that one.
I think it'd be funnier to deny Manchester United the Champions League. I'll go for that one. 2 reasons. One, because yes, it will be hilarious, and secondly, my good friend who I work with, the lovely Stephanie, lives and works in Leicester. Is a big Leicester season ticket holder, and if it gets them through at the Champions League, she may do some work for me.
Okay.
Later on, so it'll be funny that one.
Beat Man U. Gnome says beat Manchester United. Pinky, what are your thoughts? Beat Man U, deny them a spot in the Champions League, or send the Villa down to the Championship?
Had Fergie stood been at Old Trafford, it'd have been no contest. It'd have been Man United just for the sheer annoyance it would have caused him personally. But I actually quite like Solskjaer. He's a more pleasant character. So I'll let them off this year. I think sending the Villa down would give me enormous pleasure. I think they've spent an enormous sum of money. I think they've been dreadful all year. I mean, I wouldn't blame their manager per se, but I would just love it if Villa go down, because that's a club that will be up for sale. They've done their dough. And the contrast between them and Norwich City, who I think have been very well run as a football club, couldn't be starker. And Villa deserve what's coming their way.
I've always sort of thought there's an axis of entitlement amongst Premier League clubs that begins in North London with Tottenham, runs through Birmingham, through Aston, and ends up on Tyneside with Newcastle. Those 3 clubs, Villa with their history, I guess, their fans seem to think they deserve more than they get. But isn't that the same for all of us? We're all football fans, and I guess think that our teams deserve more than they're currently achieving. DL, Manchester United out of the Champions League or Villa back in the Championship?
I don't know where this all's coming from. If we beat both of them, we can have both of them, and that would make me absolutely ecstatic. If I had to choose, Villa don't register on my radar, but there's a lot of people that work at Man U fans that I will rinse if they do not get Champions League, especially if it's because of us. So it's going to have to be the Champions League.
Okay. Deny Manchester United, says DL. Rio, which one are you going for? Manchester United, or do we want to send Villa back to oblivion?
Newton Heath, every single time. It never fails to be funny. And let it continue for many, many years to come.
Okay, good stuff. So that's 3 for Manchester United, 1 for Villa. Matt, you really don't have a horse in this particular race, but I believe you've experience of working with Sir Ferguson in the past.
Oh yeah.
Any little stories you want to tell us, or anecdotes you've got there?
Well, only that. I mean, he's. So the story there is that Sir Alex Ferguson famously just didn't really do questions and answers. He would sort of rock up and just talk, and I sort of vaguely knew that, but I didn't do United games as a rule. I was working for the BBC at the time. BBC moved from London to Salford, as you know, BBC Sport.
Yep.
So we started going quite regularly to the Manchester clubs, just as a rule. I remember going along to see, I can't remember the game now. I think they'd lost in Europe. Might have been Ajax. Mm-hmm. It was a group stage game. They weren't very good. It was a year when none of our teams were doing that well. Mm-hmm. And I sort of thought, he came in, he was in a bad mood. He spoke for like a minute, 2 minutes. And I was looking around at all these other journalists. A lot of them I knew, not of them I didn't know, but the big names, the Man United guys. And I was sort of looking at him going, well, he hasn't really said anything. I'm not doing a match report. I've come to get some reaction. They've lost. So, and he speaks for a minute, gets up and starts walking out. I'm like, hold on a minute. This is why I've come. Well, I've got a question. And everyone sort of looked around at me going, well, we don't ask 30 questions. He's finished the press. I'm like, he's talked for 2 minutes. I've got a question. I sort of just, I thought I've come. I'm going to ask a question. The first question comes to my head, but I'm going to ask a question because that's why I'm here. And I said, so what should we read into this? Man City lost last night. I don't know. Someone drew the other night. Is this bad for the Premier League? Is Europe up, we're down? I can't remember. It wasn't a brilliant question. And he said something along the lines of, he was standing up, he had his hand on the doorknob to leave, and he was like, what? Huh? Gave the sort of, who are you? What? Son? What did you say, son? I'm like, yeah. I'm 45 years of age. Yes, I'm going to ask that again. And he says, are you kidding? Are you kidding? I'm like, no, I'm not kidding. You've lost and the others drew. So, and he didn't like it. And slightly embarrassing, the BBC then made a big deal out of it. They played it that morning and before breakfast, which I didn't know about. So then I kind of get into work and it's like, you're famous. I'm like, what have I done? So look, to answer your original question, no, I don't care. Yeah, beat both. I don't care. I was wondering why did you just pick on Villa because they're the one you could send down? It's not a claret and blue thing. There's not like a rule on how many claret and blue teams there can be, is there?
No, it's just my boss is an Aston Villa fan.
Oh, right. Got it.
Just as a point there, Matt, I could sort of sympathise with the Ferguson story. In the not too distant past, the website, we were given access to the post-match press conferences, and number of times that we had midweek games, and we'd sit there till some ludicrous hour of the night, more in the hope than the expectation he might actually attend. And eventually, at about 11 o'clock, somebody might stick their head round the door and he said, he's decided not to. Oh. And after one of these occasions, about 2 weeks later, I had to go up to Glasgow to do some work in my day job. And so I was staying in the Glasgow Hilton. And I got in the lift, and who should walk in but Sir Alex Ferguson, who looked at me as if he was doing me a great favour by saying, good morning. And I'm glad I had the opportunity, because I gave him an old-fashioned look, and I just blanked him, because I thought, you kept me up till gone 11 the other night.
I'm thinking about that, Gnome, and all the years that we did the press conferences, so whatever that was, 12, 13 years before I was banned, and then you were subsequently banned. I don't think I ever saw Alex Ferguson once. I can't.
I'm struggling to remember. I don't think he did.
No. But I'm just sort of going back to what Matt was saying there. I'm trying to remember who was the Southampton manager that time when Andrew Dillon of The Sun. It was like Jeremy Paxman from Newsnight at that time, where he kept repeating the same question. Who was the Southampton manager? Perhaps you were there. I don't know. Maybe you were there.
No, this is quite famous, and I can't remember it. I might look this up. Oh, I don't have got time.
Yeah,
there's been a few classics.
Yeah.
That is one.
There was 4 or 5. He pushed him on the. I mean, myself and Gnome were in stitches in the row behind, just watching this exchange. It was hilarious because Andy Dillon at the time used to perch himself up on the desk at the corner.
He did, right in the corner.
Bowling ground press room when it was that old small. But anyway, we'll come back to that one.
Yeah.
Nigel Adams, was it? Was it Nigel Adams?
Might well have been. I think it was.
Atkins. Yeah.
Atkins.
Yes, that's the one. One of the funniest things I've ever seen in a press conference. But good stuff. Anyway, thank you for that, gentlemen. It looks like just to repeat, 3 for Man U, 1 for Villa. I think I'm going to go for Villa because my best friend is an Aston Villa fan. The story is that he many years ago he asked his mother to go to Woolworths. That shows how old this story is, and buy him a West Ham shirt, and she came home with an Aston Villa shirt by mistake. And ever since he's been a Villa fan, and so just for that reason alone. So talking about Schadenfreude, there's a perfect
your
example.
former best friend, is that?
Yes. Well, of course they went on to win the European Cup and with Gary Shaw and players like that shortly after. So he's had his time in the sun anyway. So, good stuff. DL, just quickly coming to you. There was a stat you posted on the forum that I wanted to mention briefly on the podcast about West Ham have beaten 4 teams home and away this season.
I never posted it. I commented on it. I think that was Mr. Sobriquet, I think, posted it, where we've got 24 points from doing doubles over Chelsea,
Southampton, Bournemouth, Chelsea,
Norwich,
and Bournemouth were the 4 teams. So we took 24 points from 8 games, and the remaining fixtures we've got
15.
Was it 15? 13 points from the remaining 29 matches. 2 wins, wasn't it, from the other 29 games? So we beat those teams home and away. So thank you, Chelsea, for keeping West Ham in the Premier League this season, basically. Final subject for tonight. Last thing we're going to touch on, and we're going to go back to the KUMB forum for this one. There was a big story in the press this week and was talked about quite a lot on the forum about Clive Tyldesley, ITV's lead commentator, who was fired against his will this week. Didn't know much about it. Put out a video to say he didn't know why he had gone. But the question that I'd like to ask everyone is, when you're in charge, who is the first commentator to go? Who would you sack immediately? You can include past commentators or presenters that you have or would be glad to see the back of. Rio, I'm going to start with you. Who would you have up against the wall first of all?
Presenter-wise, be Gary Lineker.
Oh,
takes Smug to a whole new level. There was a discussion on the forum a few years back between me and One's Left Peg, because we was privy to some inside information about Mr. Lineker.
Yes, our Forest fan. Yep.
Yeah, where he's not as nice as he comes across in certain respects. So he's the first one against the wall, and John Motson will be right next to him.
John Motson?
Yeah.
Poor old Motson. How can you do that? Why? What's Motson done to annoy you?
Football's an emotional game, isn't it?
Yep.
It brings out kind of the romantic in you.
Yep.
And during the late 70s, early 80s, there was John Motson or Barry Davies. And Barry Davies could wax lyrical, paint pictures with words. Yep. John Motson's like sleeping with a corpse. It's just like so clinical and dull. Just shut up, man. I don't care about stats and that. Just romanticise about things. Make it interesting.
Rio says Gary Lineker for his smugness and John Motson for excessive statistical analysis. DL, who would you choose if you would gladly, if you could choose never to listen to another commentator again?
I don't even know his name. It's on the tip of my tongue. The bloke off of Sky. I really, really do not like him. The main
Tyler.
Who?
Martin Tyler.
Him and the other, Martin Tyler. Him,
okay.
He's annoyed. The bloke that done our game the other night with Neville. I've never liked listening to him. He just reminds me of a cat being dragged through glass red hot glass. Or the little bastard that just broke my vase, actually. That's what he sounded like when we was off air. But, yeah, him, I would happily shoot against the wall. Presenter-wise, I think of Gary Lineker again, not for his actual presenting, but the fact that he's become some spokesperson for the woke on Twitter. And I just want to punch him in the face, really.
Or Gary Lineker getting a lot of stick tonight from the panel. Pinky, who's your choice?
Easy. Alan Green. Alan Green. If
Alan
I, you know,
Green.
Forgot about him.
You know, the nights I'd be driving home late, listening to a match commentary, you know, which was all about Alan Green. You wouldn't even know who was playing. It could be Manchester United against Liverpool, but they wouldn't be mentioned because it was just Alan Green. Yeah. And I'm sorry, yeah. No, in the end, you just had to turn the damn thing off. So I'm afraid for me, yeah, he'd be the first to go. Bang, gone.
Alan Green gets the bullet for Pinky. Gnome.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about Alan Green because famously I had to share a commentary position with him against Southampton a couple of seasons ago on 5 Live. And let's put it this way, his views on women's football that were off air weren't exactly politically correct. And I didn't take to the chap, let's put it that way. I've got to throw in a vote here for a couple of pundits rather than commentators, if you like. Glenn Hoddle, and I'm trying to remember who said it, but somebody came up with the most marvellous quote that said something along the lines of, you could take a shot of hard liquor every time Hoddle says something interesting or intelligent about the game and still drive home with a clear conscience. And that one. And the other one who gets on my nerves is Carragher. Why? Just why? So, yeah, Alan Green and those two, please.
Then Hoddle and Jamie Carragher for Gnome. Matt, I'm not sure if you're allowed to say really in your position, but is there anyone that really cranks your gears in the presenting world?
You're squirming, haven't you?
I'm itching to answer this one, but I can't. I mean, come on, it's not fair because I used to work for the BBC, so obviously I know a lot of those guys. I mean, whether they know me is a different question, but I've worked with a few of those, and our paths are going to cross. So
Matt taking a dignified pass there. Then that's
some of the names mentioned are not my favourites.
Okay, very diplomatic.
But that's the thing, isn't it? The whole thing about football commentary is it's so personal. You know, sure. This provokes very, very lively conversation. I know we're talking about football, but it's the same in every sport. So, you know, I've written about golf and cycling, and they have exactly the same debates. They have pundits they hate, they have presenters they hate, they have commentators they hate, and it's a remarkably personal thing. Mm-hmm. The voice that is the soundtrack to your favourite sport, mm-hmm. and it fills the mailbags. I can tell you that right now. Particularly at the BBC, we were very aware of who the favourites were, who was up, who was down, who needed a bit more work, whose time was up. So yeah.
Okay.
Nice forward defensive shot there, Matt.
Thank you.
Yeah, good stuff. For my part, I'm going to go. And do you know, his name's totally left my mind. Who is the guy, the Spurs former midfielder who does Match of the Day on a Sunday night?
Jermaine Genius or Danny Murphy?
Of course. Just something about him I don't like. Maybe it's the Spurs link. I don't know. And in terms of former pundits, I can't really look any further than Brian Clough, simply for saying about Trevor Brooking, he floats like a butterfly and stings like one. So for that reason alone, I'm going to choose Brian Clough.
Graham, if I could come in as well, just on a second vote as well.
Yeah.
2006 World Cup, Germany, staying in the same hotel as the press pack. Press was superb. Yeah, you know, very, very decent guys. Mm-hmm. You also had the Sky Mob there, who nothing to do with the World Cup. They're all on the great big jolly, and I can report it was Jeff Shreve's job to carry the champagne bottle around. It was Richard Key's job to pour the champagne, and it was Andy Gray's job to drink the champagne. I kid you not. They were insufferable. I mean, just completely in their own little world. And you're just thinking, how embarrassing. And I felt for Jeff Shreves, actually. I felt for Jeff Shreves, but Keys and Gray, I'm afraid, Middle East, best place for them. Shocking.
Absolutely amazed it's taken that long, really, for Mr. Keys to come up. Interesting to hear the groans coming from Mr. Slater down there when the name was mentioned.
He writes an interesting blog. Do you ever read the Richard Keys blog?
Always, frequently, yes. It's a source of much amusement in these circles, anyway. Good stuff. Always car crash reading. I think that particular blog. But that's about it for tonight. One more thing we do need to do before we go. We do our just to explain to Matt, we do a weekly prediction league, Matt.
Okay.
We have a vote, and the guests, we also ask our weekly guests to have a vote. I'm happy to say that the guests are actually top. This is how much we know about West Ham. The guest account is actually top of the prediction league at the moment. So looking ahead to Manchester United this week, West Ham travel to Old Trafford. Man United in tip-top form. West Ham have...
Not tonight, they weren't.
No.
You seen the score?
No, which might be even worse for West Ham on Wednesday. But West Ham having recorded back-to-back victories, surely that can only go one way. But Matt, I'll start with you first as our guest and the current leaders on the table. How do you see that one going? Give me a score, please, buddy.
A score. All right. So this is Man United at home.
Man United at home to West Ham.
Sorry, Man United are going to win that game, and it's going to be 3-1.
Okay, I think we'd all take that, given the potential for relegation still via goal difference. Gnome, how do you see it going?
Funny enough, I've got 3-1 as well. Maybe one genuine goal and 2 dodgy VARs up there, as usual.
Okay, 2 for 3-1. Pinky, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think Gnome's call on VAR having an input is right. I think it's something like seven goals disallowed against Manchester United by VAR this season.
More than anyone else in the Premier League.
You know, but it doesn't benefit the so-called big clubs. I'm going 5-0 to West Ham. Absolutely, I can't see anything other than resounding win up there.
Man.
That's what's
I
happening.
get the feeling Pinky might not be topping this particular table come Sunday afternoon. DL, what do you think? Man United, West Ham? United.
2-3 to West Ham.
West Ham to win 3-2.
All right.
Great stuff. Any reason why you're particularly confident?
No reason at all. I just want to be a bit different.
Fair enough. Rio, finally, Man U, West Ham U?
I think we'll lose 2-0, to be honest.
Okay.
We just run out of steam. Antonio can't keep scoring against everybody. You know, it's got. We're safe. Let's have a bit of a break. Regroup for next Sunday, you know.
And to send the Villa back down to the Championship. Okay, I think for my part, I'm going to go for a draw because no one's had a draw yet. So I'm going to go for a cheeky 1-1 with West Ham taking the lead a la 2016 and conceding a goal in sort of the 87th, 88th minute by a very dodgy VAR decision. So we've got Matt and Gnome going for 3-1 wins to Man U. Rio 2-0. Did you say, sorry, Rio, did you say 2-0 to Man U, yeah? 2-0 defeat?
Yeah,
2-0 defeat. DL's going for a 3-2 win for West Ham. I'm going for a 1-0 draw. And Pinky is putting his neck right out there on the line with a 5-0 win for West Ham United. You never know, stranger things have happened at sea. Not many, but I'm sure they have. That is about it for tonight. I'd just like to say thank you to all my guests for joining me on tonight's Mod Pod. First of all, Gnome, thank you, buddy, for being here again.
No problem. Pleasure as ever.
Pinky, great stuff. Thank you. And thank you for preparing tonight's running order.
Pleasure.
DL, good to see you in bursts and spurts. I hope your electricity remains on for the rest of the night and that your cat hasn't swallowed any glass or anything like that.
Oh, if he cuts himself to smithereens, it's tough shit, isn't it? I don't care now. I've done my bit.
Animal welfare not top of the agenda here, as you can see tonight. Rio, cheers again, buddy. Thank you, and thank you for. Did we get any more on that stat on the last manager to be sacked before or after a West Ham defeat?
I've drawn a blank. I went to the forum. They haven't got a clue either, so it's going to take a bit of in-depth research.
Well, I'll tell you what, it'll be Solskjaer on Wednesday night.
After a 5-0.
Well, if we beat 5-0, you could well be right. You never know. Last, but very much not least, to our special guest tonight, Matt Slater of The Athletic. Matt, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you coming on the show. The very best of luck to you. And, of course, to your beloved Southend United next year. And let's hope we see them back in League One before too long.
League One? It's about the Championship. We're not stopping in League One. No, up the shrimp.
Let's dream high.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Matt. Great to have you. We'll be back on Wednesday night for alternative commentary from Old Trafford. We might be looking through our fingers at what's going on, but you never know. Pinky might be right, and we might go up and stuff them. Well, we'll see. We'll see about that one. And then, of course, we'll be back on Sunday for the final Eyes Up Mother Brown of the season. Alternative commentary from West Ham United versus Aston Villa, as we wrap up what has been an absolute, I think we can all agree, has been a most terrible campaign for West Ham. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you all again soon. And it just leaves me to say, come on, you Irons.
Come on, you Irons. Up the streamers.
Thank you.